AmaZulu versus Queen Martha and 20 others.
May it please the court, my lord. I appear for the applicants.
Yes.
Under case number 2571 and 2752, full initial
You are you Mr. Tulu? Are you Tulu?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay.
As the court pleases, my lord, I appear on behalf of the respondents, Shololo initial state.
On behalf of?
12, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and the daily respondent.
Okay. Is any other person? Yeah. In the third case?
In the third case, 10-879.
Okay. Thank you. So what I've done here, I will not read the judgment because it is full of legal jargon. I've just summarized the judgment for the benefit of the ordinary members of the public. The following summary is intended to provide a brief overview of the main facts, issues and findings made in respect of the three applications I had on 11 and 12 January 2022. The summary is not intended to form part of the judgment.
Amaphuzu lana ayebenziwe ey'nseleni ezazifakiwe entathu lapho ezazidalelwe enkantolo ngomhla ka-3 nangomhla ka-12 kuJanuwari kuwona lo nyaka esikuwona-ke ka-2022 hhayi ngoba-ke konke lokhu inkantolo ezokuchaza noma-ke ikusho kuyingxenye yesinqumo.
The one who wants to have an access in the judgment itself, the judgment is contained in the file. The three applications are brought by various members of the Zulu royal family. As the facts and circumstances are similar in each case, case numbers 2751/2021P and 2752/2021P were consolidated, and case number 108879/2021P, originally brought as an urgent application, was ordered to be heard with the other two cases. For the sake of convenience, I will now deal with each case separately.
Amaphuzu akhona sizokhumbula ukuthi amaqanda wemathathu inombolo zamacala azo zintathu ngokuhlukana-ke kwazo, kodwa-ke kuhabe sekuthiwa-ke ahlanganiswe-ke lamacala ukuze lesikhathi-ke edingidwa phambi kwalenkantolo enziwe ngesikhathi-ke esisodwa-ke la. Kodwa-ke manje-ke ekuqaleni lesikhathi beqala befaka lesi sicelo kwafakwa nje isicelo sasiphuthuma-ke la. Kodwa-ke inkantolo-ke izobe imayidingida-ke ngokubufakazi obuthe bavezwa phambi kwenkantolo izohlukanisa-ke iqala-ke ngalinye ngoba ngokuhlukana.
The first case relates to Queen Sibongile Winfred Zulu, In this application, Queen Sibongile Winifred Zulu, the applicant queen, the first wife of the late King Zwelithini Zulu, the late Isilo, initially sought wide-ranging relief. However, at the hearing, the applicant queen, partly due to the fact that some of the relief sought had been overtaken by the passing of Her Majesty Queen Shiwe Mantombi Dlamini Zulu, the late queen, restricted her relief to the following. A declaratory order that she was married to the late Isilo in terms of the civil law, in common of property and profit and loss, and that her marriage was subject to the Marriage Act 25 of 1961, a declaratory order that the late Isilo was precluded from entering into a customary union with any other person while the marriage between him and the applicant queen subsisted. C, that the executor exercises and disregards any provision of the will that is at variance with the marriage in common of property. The relief sought in prayers B and C is the final amended form.
Unkosikazi wokuqala ke wesilo sesakhuthama isilo ke la uGoodwill Zwelithini kaBhekuzulu eqaleni ke la sizwile ke ngoNdlunkulu ke uSibongile ubeveze ngoba icelo zakho beziningi izinto abeyifakile esiceleni sakhe ke la kodwa ke kuthe lesikhathi ke sekuqhubeka noma emveni kokuba ke sekukhothame ibambela bukhosi ke indlovukazi ke lana ke uMadlamini yiloko phela kwabe sekumphoqa noma ube esehla eceleni zakhe noma kuloko abekade ke echaza ke la njengokuqala nje ngokwesicelo sakhe noma abefaka khona lefuzo lokuthi ke na yena wayekade ke eshade ke nesilo esingasekho nesakhothama eshade umshado wesilungu okumshado ohlanganisa ke amafa ke la ngokomthetho ke lana ke u25 ngo1961 nalokuthi futhi ke lana ngenxa yalolu hlobo lomshado ayishade ke la nesilo isilo sasingasavumelekile ukuthi sasingakwazi ukuthi simlamanise kube khona ke oza kwabo akwabanye boNdlunkulu nanokuthi futhi okunye okuyisikhalazo la kumayelana nokuthi ke na ngokwencwadi ke leke iyamafa ke la ukuthi ke phela manje ke na ayishawe indiva kuloko okubhaliwe noma okuchazwa ngokwencwadi ke leyeva kodwa ke manje ke ecelweni ke la kwaba khona ke izinguquko ezafakwa ke la ku-B no C.
Background: on 27 December 1969, the applicant queen and the late Isilo entered into a marriage in common property and of profit and loss regulated by the Marriage Act 25 1961, which, according to the applicant queen, meant that the Isilo was precluded from entering into any other marriage.
UNdlunkulu ke la uSibongile ke uthi washada lapha ke noma kwathatha ngomhla ka26 ke umhla 27 kuDisemba unyaka ka1969 yena ke lo mfaka isicelo ke la eshada nesilo ngonyanga ke la umshado wabo umshado wesilungu owawuhlanganisa ke amafa konke ngokwalomthetho ke la ubese vezwe ngoba lo mhlobo lomshado abalishadile lalinqabela noma linvimba phela ke lana ke isilo ukuthi sasingakwazi ukuthi ke kube khona ababezomlandela.
During the subsistence of the marriage between the applicant queen and the late Isilo, the latter engaged in other love relationships. These relationships, according to the applicant queen, culminated in customary marriages, despite being precluded in terms of the Marriage Act to the first to fifth respondents, which marriages still subsisted when the late Isilo passed away.
lesikhathi ke uNdlunkulu oqala ke egcagcele nomshadile lapha ke kwaZulu naye ke inkosi ke noma isilo kuye kwathi makuqhubeka isikhathi ke isilo sabe sesimlamanisa ngoza kwabo ngabanye oNdlunkulu abamelama ke la ebumlameni kwakhe labo Ndlunkulu bona babe sebengena ke emshadweni ke la ngokwesintu begcaca ke la yize enalo mshado lo ayenawo yena nesilo okuwumshado owohlanganisa ke la kodwa ushona noma ukhothama isilo nje vele sinalamanye amakhosikazi noma oNdlunkulu abalama belama uNdlunkulu oqala.
In this matter, there were also preliminary issues where this court had to make a ruling. There were two preliminary issues that had to be dealt with prior to the hearing of the matter, which related to the further order being sought that the subsequent customary marriages of the late Isilo be declared invalid, and the issue of my recusal.
Kube khona ke amanye amaphuzu alalelwa ke na kulolu daba ke la ukuqala ukuthi kwacelwa ke la ukuthi ke na imshado lena eyalama uNdlunkulu oqala ukuthi ke ithathwe njengomshado engekho emthethweni noma engekho nanokuthi ke kwacelwa ukuthi ke umehluleli wethu ongamele la lolu daba ukuthi ke ashene.
Counsel for the African Queen had indicated that he would seek an order declaring the subsequent marriages of the late Isilo with other queens to be invalid. This despite the fact that no such relief was sought in the application. This court had first to determine whether in the papers the African Queen had asked this court to determine and make a finding on the validity of the subsequent marriages of the late Isilo with other queens. It clearly appeared from the papers that no such relief is sought. Counsel for the African Queen then sought reliance from the words that the late Isilo was precluded from entering into customary union with any other person while the marriage between him and the African still subsisted. He argued that this court should read the words that the subsequent marriages of the late Isilo with other queens were invalid into the words the king was precluded.
Leminye imishado eyalandela la abantu oNdlunkulu ke besilo inkantolo mayigunyaze noma ithi ukuthi imishado yabo ke ayikho ke emthethweni ke la ngokwesicelo sabila phela inkantolo ibisihleke iphindele emuva ukuthi kubheke ukuthi ngabe ngokwamaphepha afakwa ekuqaleni ke la ngabe lesicelo esesifakwa ke manje sasikhona yini na sasiveziwe ke na kodwa kwabe sekuvela noma kwasobala ukuthi cha into evele la inkantolo kuphela kodwa iqale lesikhathi idikezela ngamaphepha okuyiwona kwakusekelwa ke ngawo izicelo lezi zazofaka inkantolo kwakungekho kwakade ke kuveziwe noma kubhalwe phansi kokusekela ke la nje kwaphela manje sebethi banxusa inkantolo ukuthi inkantolo ayisizwe ukuthi imishado ke le ya Isilo sethu esesakhothama nalabanye oNdlunkulu ithathwe nje ukuthi ayikho ukuthi inkosi Isilo sasingavumelekile ukuthi manje sasingalamanisa lo Ndlunkulu wokuqala.
The proposed inclusion of these words will render the relief sought to be at variance with the averments contained in the African Queen's affidavit, and any invalidity would impact on the legitimacy of the children of the late Isilo born of such marriages.
kwavezwa-ke la ukuthi ke lesi sicelo ke sikaNdlunkulu la wokuqala sizoba nanokuthi phela manje ke njengoba ke sesivezile ngokwencwadi ke ifungelwe phansi ke ayifaka kuzaze kube nanomthelela akuzukuphetha nje koNdlunkulu kuphela kodwa kuzoba nanomthelela ke ngisho nasebantwaneni kumazinyane ke lana ke amazinyana ke esilo ukuthi phela manje uma ngabe ke kuchithwa ukuthi laba oNdlunkulu ke abanye imishado yaba esemthethweni kusho phela nabo laba abangabantwana amazinyane azwa nomthelela ukuthi phela manje
The court then ruled that it had not pertinently and pointedly been asked to determine the validity of the subsequent marriages of the late Silo and his other wives, and it will therefore not be just and equitable to read that the subsequent marriages of the late Silo with other queens were invalid into the word precluded.
akukho-ke lokho okuhambekayo kokuthi-ke inkantolo ingakwazi ukuthi ingenelele kuleya imishado-ke yesilo sethi sakhothama nala namanye amakhosikazi ukuthi phela manje kuzobe kwenziwa-ke ubulungiswa-ke nokufanelekile uma ngabe phela-ke inkantolo ingavele-ke igunyaze noma ibese ithi imishado yalaba abanye-ke oNdlunkulu ayikho-ke emthethweni.
Next was the application to amend. Counsel for the applicant's queen then sought to amend from the bar the notice of motion to include the prayer that all subsequent marriages between the lady Silo and first to fifth respondents are declared invalid. Counsel for the various respondents had objected to the proposed amendment, as this will cause an injustice which could not be cured by a court order, and that as such the respondents had at all times relevant to been made to believe that the validity of the subsequent marriages had not been an issue, and consequently this was not the case that they had been expecting to meet.
La emile-ke enkantolo mayelana nalolu daba-ke lakhe lokunxusa-ke la ukuthi-ke lena-ke eminye-ke imishado nalaba abanye abamlamayo oNdlunkulu-ke kusuka kokuqala kuya kowesihlanu ukuthi nayo ithathwe njengemishado-ke engekho emthethweni, kodwa-ke sezwa-ke abameli abahlukahlukene abamele laba abanye-ke oNdlunkulu-ke bephakama-ke bephikisana-ke naloku ukuthi cha lokhu phela bephakama bephikisa-ke la ukuthi cha lokhu phela manje akulona khambi noma-ke akuyona-ke ndlela futhi nanento bona ababekade belindele ekutheni iyona kunophuzo yokuba nenkinga nalena eminye imishado abanye-ke oNdlunkulu.
The application to amend was dismissed on the grounds that the procedure set out in the Uniform Rule 28 had not been followed. The application was made at a very late stage and no explanation had been provided for it not being done sooner. Such an amendment would not only be to the prejudice of the first to the fifth respondents, but to all of those who may adversely be affected by the granting of the relief sought.
kunamaphuzu ngokomthetho-ke lapha-ke unumber 28 ongalandelwanga lokho kusela futhi manje-ke kwasona lesi sicelo senziwa-ke late kakhulu kwenziweni-ke late kakhulu futhi phela manje-ke ukulungiswa noma ukuguqulwa kwalamaphepha ekade-ke efakwe ekuqaleni kuzoba nengcindezi akuze ukuba ingcindezi kuphela kulaba afuna bayibhedlele laba-ke phela manje-ke abamangali-ke ukucala kuya koyisihlanu kodwa nakwabanye-ke futhi-ke kube nomthelela-ke ongemuhle-ke kona uma ngabe-ke inkantolo ingagunyaza-ke lesi sicelo ebesesifakiwe kumele-ke kanje kulokuqala.
Application for recusal, for my recusal. At the commencement of the hearing, counsel for the applicant Queen had indicated that she was indecisive on whether or not to bring an application for my recusal since there was a rumor that I had attended or presided over one of the subsequent marriages of the late Isilo. However, after the refusal of the application to amend, the applicant Queen abandoned her application for my recusal. However, on 17 January 2022, a week after the finalization of the matter, Ms. Dandoengos, acting on behalf of the applicant Queen, purported to bring an application for my recusal, which was to be enrolled for 25 January 2022. Such application was never pursued.
Kanti uyazi-ke ekuqaleni kwalolu daba-ke ummeli-ke la kaNdlunkulu-ke lana-ke wake waba nakuba mancika-ke lana ukuthi ngabe asifake isicelo noma-ke angasifaki isicelo sokuthi acele mina njengomehluleli walolu daba ukulela angihoxe phela la ekutheni-ke ngingamele lolu daba ngoba phela ngokusho-ke kukammeli-ke kaNdlunkulu wachaza phela phela kukhona omana ngitshele noma inzwa bethi ayikade ngitholile ukuthi mina ngiwumehluleli woludaba ngake ngangamela la omunye womgcatho wesilo okusho phela manje-ke wasefuthi mina manje angihoxe kungene omunye ozongamela lolu daba kodwa-ke emveni kokuba-ke la kuye kwachithwa isicelo-ke sakhe uNdlunkulu lesokuqala sokuthi kube khona izinguquko ngokwamaphepha ayiwafakela inkantolo wabe-ke esebona ukuthi uyayiyeka-ke nezindaba ukuthi-ke aqhube nodaba lokuthi mina athi angihoxiswe njengomehluleli zoludaba noma-ke kunjalo kodwa kuthe lapha-ke ngomhla ka-17-ke kuJanuwari kulo nyaka ka-2022 emveni nje kwesonto-ke kuphothuleke udaba-ke khona-ke inkosazane-ke la uNtando yenkosi okuyena obekade-ke emele la loyo-ke uNdlunkulu naye ukwazama ukuthi afake isicelo kuba kuphela angikuduze noma angisuswe mina njengomhluleli-ke la ekutheni ngingamele lokucala kangoba udaba lolo luzoqhuba noma luzoya enkantolo ngomhla ka-25 kuJanuwari-ke kunyaka ka-22 kodwa-ke akuzange saqhubeka-ke noma leso sicelo-ke sivezwe.
The issue in this matter is whether the applicant Queen is entitled to a declaratory order. In Rail Communities Action Group versus Transnet Ltd, trading as Metro Rail, 2005, Volume 2, SA 359, CC, this is the Constitutional Court. The Constitutional Court defined the declaratory order as a flexible remedy which can assist in clarifying legal and constitutional obligations in a manner which promotes the protection and enforcement of our Constitution and its values, unquote. It was argued on behalf of the applicant Queen that the status of her civil marriage and the subsequent customary unions requires clarity and judicial determination, as these issues will directly have an impact on the patrimonial consequences of the applicant Queen's marriage and will affect the manner in which the estate of the Lady Silo is to be wound up.
isinqumo besathathwa-ke lapha-ke la kuhlanzwa-ke khona-ke ngokomthethosisekelo okutheni-ke ikuphi ukucacisa uhlolo lodaba ukuthi khambili noma-ke phela manje kuyacacisa ukuthi-ke uyabona-ke umthetho iwona phela manje usukufunele ube ikhambi-ke la kulolu daba nanokuthi kusetshenziswe-ke la ngokomthethosisekelo-ke lapho phela manje-ke sikhuthaza nalapho-ke phela siphoqa ukusetshenziswa nokuqikelelwa noma ukuhlonishwa-ke la kokubaluleka komthethosisekelo-ke la ukuthi-ke na uma ngabe inkantolo-ke isihlaziya-ke kuhlanganisa lokho nangabona lolu daba ukuthi uyabona uma ubheka ngabona lolu daba-ke la obekuveziwe-ke la bekade-ke kuvezwa-ke iy'khalazo ngokwesicelo sandlunkulu wokuqala-ke la mayelana nesimo somshado wakhe ukuthi yena washada umshado engawubiza ukuthi owesilungu. Manje-ke lo uselwisana noma uphikisana kufanele inkantolo icacise-ke manje kulena eminye imishado eyayimlandela-ke manje-ke isiza-ke la ukuthi-ke phela manje-ke ungabe-ke lokho-ke kuzoba namthelela muni ngoba phela manje lokho usekubona ukuthi kuzoba nomthelela-ke manje uNkulunkulu-ke la mayelana namafa esilo esesakhothama.
Before granting declaratory relief, this court should have regard to various factors, namely whether the law is clear on the subject matter, the existence or absence of a live dispute, the utility of the declaratory relief, and whether, if granted, it will settle the question in issue between the parties. The courts will not grant relief in respect of the issue which is moot, abstract, hypothetical, and academic.
Uyabona-ke ngiyinkantolo-ke ngaphambi kokuthi-ke ngigunyaze lesi sicelo-ke la inkantolo kusafuneke kube khona-ke amaphuzu-ke amaningi ahlukahlukene ekufuneke ngiwabheke njengoba phela ngokomthetho ukubekeke wacaca ukuthi phela inkantolo funeke ibheke ukuthi ngabe-ke kulo mbango osowushisa phansi kangaka lo mbango kukhona yini iphuzu lempikiswana elibambekayo noma eliphilayo nakulolu daba nanokuthi futhi manje uma ngabe-ke mina ngiyinkantolo ngigunyaza noma-ke ngivuma la funeke phela kube khona umbuzo ukuthi ngabe isinyozo sami sizosombulula yini noma sizonikeza nesixazululo ngoba phela manje ngiyinkantolo mina angeke ngivele nginike isigunyazo salo mbango kodwa engikubonayo ukuthi-ke umbango njengathi ufane uma kuzobangwa ithambo elingenanyama noma kusho ukuthi nje ukubanga nomuntu ongabangi naye akukho umbango uma ubheka.
It is admitted that the African Queen and the Lady Silo had entered into a civil marriage in common of property and a profit and loss, and the proprietary consequences of such marriage in common property are also not in issue.
Impela-ke kunjalo-ke la kumukeliwe udaba lokuthi uyabona-ke uNdlunkulu lokuyena ukufaka isicelo nesilo-ke sesakhuthama la ngempela-ke bangena kubona lo hlobo lomshado lwesilungu uhlobo lomshado oluhlanganisa-ke lana-ke amafa la okukuthula nanemiphumela-ke yakhona lo hlobo lomshado into okungayona into ephikisiwe noma eyinkulumo mpikiswano.
If regard is had to the legal position that courts will not decide mere academic disputes, but only disputes where rights have actually been infringed, and that there must be a concrete dispute between the parties, the African Queen had failed to show that she had a right which is being infringed and needs protection.
Embangweni okucaca ukuthi awukho mbango lapho phela kuvela khona ukuthi akukho lungelo eliphuliwe noma ilungelo lomuntu esuke lihlukumeziwe-ke lapho ngoba phela manje uma ubheka fanele kube khona into ephathekayo nebambekayo enhlangothini zombili njengoba ubona ukuthi yabona uma ubheka ngalolu hlangothi-ke uNdlunkulu la uhlulekile ukuthi ke aveze lana ukuthi ke na kukhona amalungelo akhe awamuthiwe noma aphuliwe ukuthi ke udinga ukuthi ke inkantolo ke ingelele ukuthi ke imvikele.
If there is a dispute between the parties, it must be alleged as one of the factors which the court will take into account in considering whether it will exercise its discretion. In the present matter, there is no dispute as to the nature, status, and proprietary consequences of the marriage between the applicant and the late Isilo.
Kufanele ukuthi inkantolo iye ibheke la ibhekelele enhlangothini zombili kulo mbango ibese isebenzisa ke ngokuthule noma ngokwamandla ayo ukubheka lo mbango. Manje uma ubheka la kulolu daba ke na ngempela akukho into eyinkulumo noma ekufiswana ngaye ebambekayo ngoba uma ubheka la ngempela lo mshado kaNdlunkulu wokuqala wokuthi yena wayeshade ngomhlobo ashade ngalo into engaphikisiwe.
No practical effect will be achieved by a determination of the questions posed in the present matter. The legal consequences of the African Queen's civil marriage to the late Isilo are prescribed by the relevant legislation applicable to civil marriages in community of property and common law, and such law is clear on the subject and need not be restated. Accordingly, I do not deem it necessary and equitable to grant a declaratory in this regard.
Uyabona ke umshado ke kaNdlunkulu ngomfakisicelo mayelana nokuthi yena ushade ngalo hlobo ashade ngalo nesilo sesakhothama impela ke nangoko kweshamthetho ukhona ke umthetho ovezile futhi lo uyahlonishwa lo kwalomshado ke lo uhlanganisa ke amafa futhi ke kucacile la asikho nanokuthi ke bekhona ke isidingo sokuthi kungakhona ukuthi ngiyelelele lenkulumo ngalo ndlela ke akukho la engikubona mina okufanele mhlawumbe ngathi ngigunyaze la isicelo sakhe ke uNdlunkulu sathi uyasifaka.
To hold that the late Isilo was precluded from marrying any other person during the subsistence of his marriage with the African Queen will have no practical effect in the absence of the relief as an outcome of such preclusion.
Uyabona ngisho nalento leyo ukuthi mina ngikutho angigunyaze udaba lokuthi Isilo sasingavumelekile ukuthi manje sasingangena kweminye yemshado emveni kokuba sesishadele laShadula noNdlunkulu ukubanga nobani uma ngigunyaza lo ngikwenza bani umbango ongenamuntu engathi ngizobe ngigunyaza phuzweni kabani lokho.
The African Queen has not in fact sought an order declaring the Isilo's customary marriage invalid. This court therefore does not want to and cannot overstep the bounds of what it has been called upon to decide as per the amended notice of motion. The declaratory orders are not accompanied by any other form of relief except that the executor should disregard any provision of the will which is in conflict with the marriage in community of property. This, in my view, too broad, vague, and impracticable to implement.
Imishado le yesintu yalaba abanye oNdlunkulu ayikho emthethweni la manje ngalo ndlela ke manje ke inkantolo ke izothi izongenela lapho bengaphikisiwe kwalokho ukuthi lokushada kwabo ngokwesintu akukho emthethweni Manje ke phela manje nayo inkantolo iyabona ukuthi uyabona uma usubheka ke lolu daba lunabile kunalolo nje lolu nje laveza ukuthi inkantolo ingakwazi ukuthi izongena kulombango oshisayo omayelana nencwadi le yezamafa.
The African Queen seeks a declaratory that she is entitled to a 50% share of the joint estate. However, it is not clear from her application as to what type of estate the African Queen lays her 50% claim, regard being had to the fact that the estate of the royal household is divided into 5 categories. That she is entitled to 50% of the estate is a proprietary consequence of her marriage in common of property, and the law is clear on the subject. However, as to what estate she lays 50% claim to is, in my view, a matter for the executor and ultimately the master of the High Court to determine at an appropriate time when the liquidation and distribution account lies for inspection and claims by various queens are determined.
Noma ke kunjalo kodwa akucacile ukuthi ngokusho kwaNkulunkulu okuyikona yiphi le ngxenye ka 50% okuyiyona ke ayifunayo lena ngoba uma usubheka khona manje ke la ngokwalapha ke eNkulunkulu noma lapha ke ekhosini ke la kunezinto ke la noma ke kunalawo zihlukaniseke amahlanu ke la okusho ukuthi phela manje uma ngabe sengibheka lena ngokusho kwakhe lokhu kuphikaphile kungacaci ukuthi ukubhekiseke ngakuphi uma ngabe ngibona ke la ukuthi yena umnyango obumfanele yilo wezamafa okuyiwona kufanele ke ayobheka ke kuwona nokuyilapho bekade sezothi masebhekwa phela manje kuyibona abafanelekile masebhekwa ngokwezinto abazinikwa ke bewondlunkulu ukuthi banikezelwa ndlela nokuyilapho yena angakabheke khona ukuthi abheke
The application was brought in anticipation of the impending installation of the late Queen as a regent or successor to the throne. This has been rendered moot because in the intervening period, that's the period between the launching of the application and the hearing of the matter, the Queen had passed away. The matter in this regard is moot and hypothetical and will have no future practical effect. It is against this background that the applicant Queen no longer pursues the relief sought in paragraph 2D and E of the notice of motion.
Kubese kwenza phela into engabambeki noma into ekuveza ukuthi akunambanga phela manje ngoba lokhu yena okwakuthi kwakubangwa naye phela manje embe kuba sekuvezwe lesicelo la indlovukazi le yakhothama manje okusho ukuthi phela manje ke akusenasekelo ke phela manje kuyena umuntu esingathi ke kubanga naye akekho la ngoba phela manje lokho kwazi kwaphelela ekutheni ke ngokwandlunkulu waze waphoxisa noma wayeka ezinye zezizathu noma zezinto abeyivezile ebesekela ke ngazo isicelo sakhe lapha ke eyincwadini ke lapha oku-2D and 2E.
The applicant Queen also challenges the will of the legislature insofar as it purports to deal with assets to which the applicant Queen has a legitimate claim arising from her marriage to the legislature. It has been argued on behalf of the first to fifth respondents that the executor has yet to wind up the late Isilo's estate. It is therefore premature to anticipate a dispute involving the executor which has not yet arisen.
sesicelo ke sikaNdlunkulu ke la ebekade siphikisana incwadi yefa lika silo ke noma isilo sethi sakho sama njengoba phela manje lokho ke kube seke kubalwa ke nezinto noma nezipahla lezo ke ukuthi ke yena abe lezo ukuthi agunyazwa ukuthi ke azithole phela ngokohlobo lomshado ke aye nalo ongasekho ke la isilo manje ke futhi ke kuphinde ke kwaze kwavezwa ke la inkulumo mpikiswana noma beveza amaphuzu la abamele laba ke abamangalele noma laba abaziphindelela udaba ke lokuqala ke kwemhlanu ukuthi cha uyabona ke phela manje ke la lokhu ngokwefa noma ngokwencwadi le yefa ke okuyiyona egunyaza noma kokuyiyona ke phela manje siyinkulumo ke mpikiswana ukuthi phela manje cha uyabona uma ubheka kulesikhathi bekungakafani kusheshe kwaphuthunwa ukuthi ke kuze kube nale mpikiswana ekubeni lokho bekufanele ukuthi kulandele umndeni wami.
This matter was brought to court long before the estate of the Lady Silo was reported to the Master of the High Court. This court is asked to preempt a dispute which may arise between the applicant queen and the executor or other queens. The applicant queen is entitled to lodge a claim with the executor in terms of the Estate Act. The applicant queen has not made out a case in respect of any of the relief sought in the amended notice of motion.
Manje ke lenkantolo iyabona ukuthi manje ke lokho la kwenziwe ngaphambili ukuthi ngala bese kuvela ke ngobona lokho ukuthi kube khona ngokwesicelo sakhe ke umfaka wesicelo ke lokuphikisana nalaba abangabanye ke noma abanye ebombunkulu manje ke ngempela ke uNdlunkulu ukufaka kwakhe ke lesi sicelo kahle kahle nekwafuna afake isicelo sakhe ngoba umthetho uyamgunyaza ukuthi kufanele aye lapha ke kwezamafa labo khona ufaka khona isicelo ke la manje kusho ukuthi uyabona uma ubheka le la ngokwale icala lombango elilapha kwami akukho ke lana ke engathi ke ukwazi ukuthi ke aveze ukuthi kubambeke ukuthi ngokombango lo azobanga la ukuthi kuyabambeka na.
Therefore, the order made in this regard is that the application is dismissed with cause, such cause to include cause consequent upon the employment of senior counsel. I now move to the application of the applicant princesses 2752/2021P. The applicants in this application are the daughters of the Lady Silo of Waketomtanda Royal Palace. They challenge the authenticity and validity of the will of the Lady Silo on the grounds that the signatures appended thereto in various places are not that of the Lady Silo. The applicants contend that the validity of the impugned will has a fundamental impact not only on the devolution of the estate of the Lady Silo, but also on the determination of the successor to the Zulu royal throne.
Ngokusho kwabo noma isicelo sabo kasifakile phambi kwenkantolo baphikisana nobuqotho nobunjalo bencwadi yefa sesilo esingasekho la amaphuzu abawaveza ukuthi uyabona ke iphawu noma izimpawu lezi ezivele lapha encwadini yefa phecelezi ama-signature bathi akuwona ke la silo esingasekho ke la manje ke futhi ke baphikisana ke la kuloko kuze kube nanomthelela ekutheni ngisho nalo oseqokwa ukuthi ke manje angaba ke la ngene ezinyaweni noma ke kuyena ozothatha ubukhosi lapha ke ekhosini ke bakwaZulu.
In the amended notice of motion, among other things, the applicants seek an order suspending the execution of the impugned will pending the final determination of an action to be instituted by the applicants relating to the validity thereof. B. Interdicting and restraining the seventh respondent from performing any function or duties assigned to him in terms of the provisions of the last will and testament of his late, the Majesty King Zwelithini Zulu. C. Interdicting the ninth respondent from recognizing and undertaking any step which may be reasonably construed as recognizing the 12th respondent as a Silo AmaZulu. D. Interdicting the ninth respondent from announcing the date of the coronation in the event that the ninth respondent has completed all processes envisaged in Section 17 of the KwaZulu-Natal Traditional Leadership and Governance Act 5 of 2005, interdicting and restraining the 11th respondent from issuing the certificate of recognition to 12 respondents, and F, directing the 11th respondent in terms of Section 9, Section 3 of the Traditional Leadership and Governance Framework Act 41 of 2003 to refer the matter concerning the identification of the successor to the throne as a Silo AmaZulu back to the Zulu royal family for reconsideration and resolution.
Banxusa inkantolo ukuthi manje inkantolo ke ayikubamba noma ke igode ukugunyazwa lapho lokhu kunjalo kwezamafa lawo abhaliwe ngokwencwadi yamafa nanokuthi futhi ke banxusa inkantolo ukuthi inkantolo ingenelele ukuthi inqande loyo ongumphakwesicelo wesikhombisa ekutheni ke enze imisebenzi yalapha ke esigodlweni njengokwencwadi yesilo eyayikade-ke imgunyaza ke la ukuthi makenze lo msebenzi njengoba kusho yona-ke isilo-ke singasekho-ke ngonyama la uKing Goodwill Zwelithini Zulu nanokuthi futhi-ke baphinde bafake isicelo sokuthi inkantolo mayinqande loyo-ke ongumpakwe noma loyo oziphendlelayo noma omangalelwa unumber 9 ukuthi-ke na akangathathwa nanokuthi-ke futhi manje angathathwa njengokuthi uyena muntu okufanele phela manje-ke angene ezicathulweni lana-ke njengesilo AmaZulu nanokuthi futhi abaphinde baphumусela lapha kwenkantolo ukuthi unqandwe phela manje-ke ukuthi-ke la umthetho wakwaZulu ukuthi phela manje ukhiphe incwadi okuyisitifiketi esiyisona sesikhishwe sokugunyazwa kwaloyo osuke inyulwa noma osuke ezoqokwa njengomholi la wesilo AmaZulu nanokuthi futhi la bathe banxusa futhi ukuthi-ke la inkantolo-ke la mayelana nodaba lokuthi-ke uqokwe loyo ofanele ukuthi abe ozongena-ke esihlalweni njengesilo AmaZulu udaba maluphindele-ke emuva lapha-ke ebukhosini-ke umndeni kweyiwona ozacubungula uze nesisombululo.
In 2016, the late Silo made a will in which he appointed the late Queen as his successor and bequeathed various assets to his 6 wives and their children. However, the late Queen passed away on the 29th of April 2021. Her will was read on 7 May 2021 after the funeral. At the reading of her will, it was announced that she had nominated Prince Mrs. Zulu as the successor to the throne.
indlovukazi naye seyakhothama njengomuntu okuyena owayezothatha isihlalo ke la nezinye zezinto ke lazanikezelelwa laba abanye ondlunkulu ke abayisithupha nabantwana noma ke kunjalo kodwa kuthe uma ngabe ke la indlovukazi ke la ikhothama ngonyaka ke ngomhla ka-29 ku-April 2021 ke la incwadi yefa ke manje yendlovukazi yakhothama yabeke isifundwa ngaleli langa eyayitshalwa ngalo okungumhla ka-7 kuMeyi kunyaka ka-2021 ke emveni kokutshalwa kwendlovukazi nokuyilapho ke incwadi yefa le yiyona phela manje eyabe isidalula noma isisho ukuthi ke indlovukazi le yayiqoka umntwana uMisizulu njengokuyena ofanelekile ukuthi phela angene lapha ke esihlalweni.
The Zulu royal family met on 14 May 2021 and identified and nominated Prince Mrs. Zulu as the successor to the Zulu throne. No dispute was raised in this regard. It was argued that the validity of the Isilo's will have a fundamental impact not only on the devolution of the estate of the late Isilo, but also on the determination of the successor to the Zulu royal throne. The identification of a successor to the Zulu royal throne is an issue which requires proper ventilation and debate by the royal family.
Ngomhla ka-14 kuMeyi kunyaka ka-2021 nokuyilapho ke ekwabeke sekuqokwa kwakhethwa umntwana uMisizulu njengokuyena muntu owayezongena phela ke ezinyaweni zokuthi ke phela manje ke angene lapha ke esihlalweni sobukhosi. Akuzange kube khona ukuphikisana okwaqhamuka ngalokho kodwa kwabakhona ukukhombisa kokuphikisana noma nokubona ukuthi incwadi yefa yesilo sesakhothama ayinjalo kangoba phela manje lokho akuzange bese kuphelela nje mayelana nodaba lelo lokuthi incwadi yefa ke ayikho kahle noma bayiphikisa kwaze kwaba nanomthelela manje ngokwesihlalo salapha ke ekhosini nokuyilapho phela manje ke qoba ke manje ke kwalozo hlala ke esihlalweni ke la kwabe bese kuna kuphela manje ke kube khona uthungo besiswe ke lapha khona lapha ke ekhosini.
The African princess is content that the members of the royal household will be directly impacted by the appointment of Prince Mrs. Zulu as a seal pursuant to the nomination contained in the impugned will, read with the will of the late Queen. In the absence of the nomination of the late Queen in the impugned will, she would not have the authority to nominate the successor, and her wishes would have no role to play in the ultimate determination of the Isilo.
Impela ke la lo kuzoba nomthelela ukubona ukuthi ke uqoba umntwana ke uMisizulu njengesilo lokho phela manje ke njengoba usukela lapha ke encwadini yefa yendlovukazi siyakhothama manje ke lokho njoba ke engasekho ke la lendlovukazi manje ke kusho ukuthi ke akufanelanga ukuthi ke akunagunya lokuthi phela manje ke aqokwe njengomuntu noma yena njengoba enqobile ke lokhu phela manje isifiso sakhe phela manje ke sesithathwa njengoba phela manje uqoba kwakhe kusho ukuthi ke akukho kahle ngokusemthethweni ukuthi ke
It was argued that the balance of convenience favors the applicant's princesses in that if it is found that the signature appended to the impugned will are a forgery, this will render the will invalid and impact on the legitimacy of the nomination of Prince Misuzulu as a silo.
laba amaziyane besilo uyibona faka isicelo la uma ngabe kuwukuthi ngempela utholakala ukuthi incwadi le iyefa abaphikisana nayo ngokwama-signature la bathi kena akuhambi kahle kuphela manje-ke ayikho emthethweni noma kwakodwa kuphela manje-ke sekuqokwa-ke kwemntwana umisizulu-ke akukho-ke emthethweni noma akufanelekile.
The applicant princesses admittedly say that they are not contenders for the Zulu throne, nor do they have or know of anyone in the Zulu royal family who has a better right or entitlement to the throne than Prince Misuzulu. Also, the applicant princesses do not seek to review the royal family's decision of 14 May 2021.
bangono ukuthi ke anikwe ke lesi sikhundla sobukhosi ngale kwamntwana umisizulu kanti futhi ngokusho ke kwabo laba abantwana bathi futhi manje ukuthi hayi ukuthi bafuna ukuthi kubuyekezwe noma kuyobhekwa lapha ke emuva leya ngqoqo noma isinqumo esasithathwe lapha ke esigodlweni noma lapha ke ebukhosini engxoxweni ezaqhubeka ngomhla ka-14 kuMeyi kunyaka ka-2021.
The issues for determination in this application are A, the authenticity and validity of the will of the late Isilo. B, whether the applicant princesses are entitled to stay the process leading to the identification, nomination, recognition, and coronation of Prince Misuzulu as a successor to the throne.
yesile sesakhuthama ngempela iyiyo njoba injalo na noma ke khona okushaya amanzi khona na nanokuthi futhi ke la ngokwesicelo salaba abangaba amasinyane ke esilo ke lana ukuthi ngabe bona banalo yini ke igunya lana ke lokumisa ke inqubo yokuqokwa nokucagula noma yokwaziwa lana nokuthi phela futhi manje ke bese ke egcotshwa umntwana la umisizulu njengomntwana ke ongena ke ofunyazo ukuthi ahlale ke esikhalweni.
The analysis, the applicant princesses have failed to establish a discernible correlation between the proceedings relating to the impeachment of the late Isilo's will and the identification and nomination of Prince Misuzulu as the successor to the Zulu royal throne by the royal family. The applicant princesses have also not shown a direct and substantial interest which can be adversely affected if Prince Misuzulu is appointed king of the Zulu nation.
bethi la incwadi yefa yesizwe sakuthama kukhona okushaya amanzi kuyona noma ke okungahambi ngendlela nanokuthi futhi manje laba mayelana nokuqoka nokuqagula ke komntwana omisizulu njengozuthatha isihlalo ke lapha ke esihlalweni sobukhosi ke bakwaZulu laphana futhi ke uma ubheka labantwana ke abazange futhi ke baveze noma basho ukuthi bona ngokwabo kukhona yini intshisakalo bona bafuna beyibo yini noma kukhona yini umthelela ongakhona umqoka kwa umntwana omisizulu ukuthi kuzoba namthelela muni ke kubona uma ngabe ke eqoka njengenkosi yesizwe samaZulu.
The evidence establishes that the identification, nomination, and appointment of Prince Msizulu as the king of the Zulu nation is not solely dependent upon the validity of the late Isilo's will. On 14 May 2021, the Zulu royal family assembled and identified Prince Msizulu as the successor to the Zulu throne according to the Zulu customary law and customs.
Komntwana umisizulu inkosi yesizwe samaZulu akuncikanga kuphela encwadini yefa lethwele ebheke kuyona kuphela kodwa encwadi le yefa ke Silo sisakhuthama kodwa ke manje ke lapha ngomhla ka-14 kuMeyi kunyaka 2021 lapha besigodlweni noma ke lapha ke ebukhosini kwahlanganwa nokuyilapho ke ehlanganweni kwabo nokuyilapho kwaqokwa khona umntwana umisizulu njengokufanelekile ukuthi angahlala ehlalweni lana ke sehlalweni sobukhosi bamaZulu njengokwesintu noma ngokumthetho wamaZulu.
In the premises, the marital status of the applicant queen and the validity of the late Isilo's will do not in any way stand in the way of the court determining the issue of the succession to the Zulu throne. The interdictory relief sought in this regard will therefore be unnecessary. However, the question of succession to the Zulu throne is to be determined with reference to the Zulu customary law and the traditions, which are self-standing rules, separate and distinct from common law and the Marriage Act, which govern the validity of the late Isilo's will and the applicant's queen's civil marriage. However, it is common cause that this application is not about who the successor to the throne is, but about an interdict against the implementation of the will of the late Isilo.
Zombie lezi umshado incwadi leyefa akukho lutho akumi endleleni yokuthi ungaqabula noma bekukhonjwe uqobe loyo ofanelekile ukuthi angene ehlalweni sobukhosi ke la ngoba phela manje uyabona ke udaba lokuqoba komuntu osukufanele uthathe isihlalo sobukhosi kubele ngosobala lapha ke umthetho ke la wamaZulu nangokosiko ngokwesintu ke lana ke ukuchaza ngoba kuhlukile futhi ke kuna lo mthetho ojwayelekile nangakho umthetho wezimishado ke la kunyaza ke noma ukuchaza ke malana nencwadi leyefa bese nanomshado ke uNkulunkulu oqala noma ke kunjalo kodwa uma usubheka sizokhumbula ukuthi lolu daba kunjalo ukuthi asidingidi mayelana nokuthi ubani ofanele unyazwe noma hlale lapha ke esifaleni kodwa bekuphikiswa ukuthi ke phela manje ke incwadi leyefa yesilo ukuthi ke ayibanga noma ke kukhona okushaya amanzi ke manje.
The impeachment of the late Silo's will has no bearing whatsoever on the succession dispute, since the name of Prince Misuzulu does not feature anywhere therein. The applicant princesses further do not claim that Prince Misuzulu was not identified or appointed in accordance with Zulu customary law and traditions, or that they or someone else has a better entitlement or right than that of Prince Misuzulu to succeed to the throne. There is therefore no dispute for the Premier or the President to investigate and to refer back to the Zulu royal family for reconsideration and resolution in terms of Section 8, Section 4 of the Leadership Act.
Awazange asho ukuthi ke na umntwana ke uMisizulu ke akazange ke aqokwe laphana ke nanokuthi futhi njengoba ke kushiwo ngokomthetho ke la kulomthetho ke kwamaZulu nangokwesintu ukuthi futhi baveze ukuthi ke ngale kwegama lakhe umntwana uMisizulu ukhona yini omunye ongcono noma osemathubeni angcono kunalokho ukuthi kungathiwa uyena ofanele-ke aqokwe ukuthi-ke azongena lapha esihlalweni. Kangoba ke la asikho ngisho nanokuthi-ke lento into engaphikisiwe-ke la njengokuthi-ke ukungenela kwandunankulu naye umongameli ukuthi-ke kuphenywe-ke la lezi zinto zalapha-ke emuva zalapha-ke ebukhosini mayelana nokuthi-ke kube khona isisombululo esikhona nje phela njengoba umthetho-ke uchaza-ke lo wezobuholi.
Because there's no dispute.
Ngoba phela akukho kuphikisana.
The authenticity and validity of the will of the late Silo is an issue. Messias Yossi Visoker and Cecil Greenfield were instructed to compare the signatures in the will of 29 November 2016, purporting to be those of the late Silo, with the late Isilo's acknowledged signatures and to express an opinion on their authenticity. There are divergent handwriting expert findings and conclusions by these experts. One expert states that the signatures are a forgery, and the other expert states that the signatures in question were those of the late Silo. According to Mr. Greenfield, the signature on the late Silo's will, dated 29 November 2016, were probably written by the late Silo despite the similarities and are as such, in his view, authentic.
okuyibona abayalelwa ukuthi-ke phela manje-ke benze-ke uqhathanyiso lamaphawu phecelezi-ke ama-signature-ke la Silo sesaphuthama-ke la ukuthi-ke baveze-ke bona umbono-ke wabo ukuthi ngabe-ke uma kuqhathaniswa nokubhekwa lama-signature ayiwona ngempela yini la okuphele sekuvezwa-ke la ngokochwepheshe bezobhala-ke oyedwa wabo wachaza ukuthi-ke lama-signature-ke afojiwe kusho ukuthi akalona la awesilo kodwa ngokomunye ochwepheshe yena waveza ukuthi cha awaso-ke isilo la kangoba-ke la ngokusho-ke kwa-Greenfield ube sechaza ukuthi la ma-signature la awesilo lapha ngomhla 29 kuNovemba kunyaka ka-2016 impela-ke ngaba awakhe-ke isilo yize kunalokhu noma lezo zikhuluma lokho fanisa-ke okusho ukuthi ngokubona kwakho cha le ncwadi-ke impela iyikona njalo.
This raises a sharp dispute of fact which should be resolved by trial or referral of the issue for the hearing of oral evidence. However, the applicant's princesses do not ask this court to make a determination on the authenticity and validity of the will, but to grant interdictory relief in respect thereof, pending an action to be instituted with regard to the authenticity and validity of the will, and the process leading to the coronation of Prince AmaZulu.
Sefana phela udaba lihambe liyoxhoshelwa ngemishana inkulu-ke manje ukuze phela manje-ke ubizo kulalela ubufakazi qobo enkantolo ukuze kutholakale-ke lapho ukuthi-ke ikuphi okuyikona noma-ke kunjalo kodwa-ke bona abazange basho ngokwamazinyane-ke silo lawo abantu abafake isicelo akukona ukuthi babefuna ukuthi inkantolo inyaze noma-ke izobheka udaba lokuthi le ncwadi yamafa isilo esingasekho ukuthi-ke iyo na noma-ke cha kodwa bona babefuna nje ukuthi inkantolo inyaze ukuthi phela manje-ke inqande-ke lana ukuthi-ke kugcotshwe umntwana-ke uMisuzulu.
With regard to the question of whether the applicant princesses will suffer any prejudice and irreparable harm in the event of the interdictory relief not being granted, it has been argued on behalf of the applicant princesses that if the will is ultimately found to be invalid, the applicant princesses will suffer great prejudice as the will will have been executed. The applicant princesses, in my view, have satisfied this court that if they are not afforded a protection, they will suffer prejudice, and the balance of convenience favors them in that the will can be implemented at any time. However, the applicant princesses have not made out a case for the stay of the process leading to the coronation of Prince AmaZulu.
Yebo kubeziwe ehlangothini labo ukuthi ngempela-ke uma ngabe kuthola le ncwadi lefa ngempela ayikho-ke emthethweni lokho phela kuzobanika insidezi enkulu-ke phela manje egameni labo lezamafa. Ngaleyo ndlela kuma ngibheka-ke mina impela bakwazile-ke amazinyanisilo-ke la ukuthi angigculise ukuthi uma ngabe-ke kuwukuthi-ke la abanikwa ithuba lokuthi bavikeleke bona la uma ngabe-ke kugunyazwa-ke la le ncwadi kusho phela khona ingcindezi bona abazolithola-ke la kodwa uyabona uma sesikhuluma ephuzweni lewili leyo yebo ngiyabezwa kodwa uma ngabe-ke sesikhuluma ngodaba lokuthi akumiswe ukuthi-ke nakugcotshwe umntwana womisiZulu ngempela abakwazanga ukuthi mina banginikezele noma kube nezizathu engikwazi ukuthi ngizizwe ukuthi kungani kufanele-ke ngigunyaze ukumiswa kokuthi kugcotshwe umntwana womisiZulu.
Therefore, it may be correct that the applicant princesses have succeeded in obtaining the interdictory relief sought with regard to the suspension of the execution of the impugned will. It will not be just and equitable to award them costs before the question of authenticity and validity of the impugned will has been decided. In my view, costs relating to the impugned will should be reserved for the court determining its authenticity and validity. The applicant princesses have not made out a case for the interdictory, relief sought on the question of succession to the throne. Therefore, the court should follow the result in respect of that relief sought.
Ngoba phela manje ke kungebi ukulungiswa uma ngabe ke kungathiwa sithi ngoba phela ke nabo bakhokhe ke la ke indleko ngoba asazi ekugcineni isinqumo senkantolo kuyona ezodingida mayelana nodaba lolu lwencwadi le yefa le okuyiyona ezibona ukuthi ke fanele ukuthi banyasekele lapho ukuthi kumiswe ukuthi kukhulunywe lolu daba lolu kodwa mayelana nodaba lokuthi ke uma ngabe becela ukuthi ke kumiswe ukuqoqwa komuntu ofanelekile ukuthi ke afakwe esihlalweni sobukhosi cha abakwazanga ukuthi ngempela baveze noma ukuthi izinto ezibambekayo ukuthi ke kungani kufanele ke kulaba nje la kumiswe. Ukuthi kulaba nje uma sekukhulunywa ngokwezezindleko ke la lezo zalapho asizuba inkantolo lezi ukuphunyazwa ke lapho ukuthi ke kube yibona abazokhokha ukuthi ke bakhokhele indleko la ekhuzweni lalo dodaba.
The order is, in the result, I make the following order. 1. The execution of the last will and testament of the late His Majesty King Goodwill Zwelithini be and is hereby suspended pending the final determination of the action referred to in paragraph 3 of this order. 2. The 7th respondent be and is hereby interdicted and restrained from performing any functions or duties assigned to him in terms of the provision of the last will and testament of His late Majesty Goodwill Zwelithini Zulu. 3. The applicants are directed to institute an action challenging the authenticity and validity of the will referred to in paragraph 1 above within 15 days of this order, failing which the relief granted in paragraph 1 of this order shall lapse. 4. The costs are reserved for the trial court. And 5. The application for relief sought in prayers C, D, E, and F is dismissed with costs, such costs to include costs consequent upon the employment of 2 counsel.
Impela inkantolo ke izokumiswe ke ukuphunyazwa ukuze kufinyelele ekutheni ke inkantolo okuyona ezodingida lo daba iphutshwe ngalo lo daba nanokuthi futhi ke la mayelana nesicelo lesabo sokuthi ke na kumiswe ukusebenza kwalo omangalelo onaba 7 ke impela inkantolo izobaphunyazwa ke lapho ke kulelo phuzu lelo. Nanokuthi futhi ke lana ke inkantolo ke evezile ke ukuthi laba abangabafaka isicelo ke fanele kube ukuthi ke njengoba begunyazwe ke la banikezelwa izinsuku eziyi-15 kulabe kugunyazwe khona okudaba ekutheni befenze okufanelekile ukuthi phela manje bafake isicelo ngendlela okuyiyona noma efanelekile. Uma befile ukuthi bakwenze lokho kule yinsuku eziyi-15 yobe sekusho ukuthi manje ke bobe sephelwa isikhathi ekubeni manje isikhathini. Kodwa ke futhi ke manje ke iy'ndleko zalapho cha inkantolo asikho isinqumo esikhiphile mayelana nokuthi ke kukhona iy'ndleko okufaneleke akhishwana. Nanokuthi futhi ke lana ke inkantolo ichithile isicelo sabo la kule cala le noma kunamba C, D, ney'ndleko zikhona ukubona laba abangabantwana amazinyane fanele akhokhe ley'ndleko zalolu daba namamenzi ababili
Now I move on to the matter of Prince Mbonisi Pegita AmaZulu, which is the last application.
njengamanje ke inkantolo izoqhubeka-ke manje yokubeka-ke la udaba-ke mntwana umbonisi Pegita okuyisicelo-ke la sokugcina eceleni inkantolo bekuyidingile befakwe phambi kwayo.
It's case number 10879/21P. Prince Mbonisi seeks to interdict the coronation of Prince Zulu as the Silo of the Zulu nation, which was allegedly scheduled to take place on 3 December 2021. On 2 December 2021, this court declined to grant the urgent relief sought and adjourned the matter and directed that it be heard together with the applicant queen and the applicant princess's applications. The primary issue in this matter is the question of succession to the Zulu throne.
inqaba ukugunyaza-ke la lesi sicelo sasesiphuthume kodwa la ehliswa-ke udaba kwayalelwa ukuthi lezi zicelo zonke mazihlanganiswe ukuze zilalelwe mkanye sesibala nesicelo lesi sikaNdlunkulu kanjalo nalesi samazinyane esilo okuyidaba la kulokhu mayelana nobukhosi.
In this matter, the applicant seeks an order in the following terms. A. Interdicting and restraining the first and second respondents from preparing and organizing the coronation of the first respondent as the Silo AmaZulu, scheduled for 3 December 2021, pending the final determination of the applications under case numbers 2751/2021P and 2752/2021P. B. Interdicting and restraining the fourth respondent from recognizing or undertaking any steps which may reasonably be construed as recognizing the first respondent as the Silo AmaZulu, pending the final determination of the applications under case number 2751/2021P and 2752/2021P, and in the event that the fourth respondent has completed all processes envisaged in Section 17 of the KZN Act, that the third respondent be interdicted and restrained from issuing a certificate of recognition to the first respondent as a Silo AmaZulu.
zokugcotshwa-ke kwaloyo umangalelo wokuqala njengesilo samabandla eyayikade-ke kuzokwenziwa ngo-3 kuDisemba nyaka 2021 kuze kube ukuthi-ke kuphothulwa isicelo lesibabe kade besifakile-ke la ngoba la macala-ke amabili ngokwenombolo zakhona ku-2 751 of 2021P, naleso sokuthi 27 52 of 2021P. Nanokuthi futhi-ke lana-ke aphinde akunyusa-ke ngokwesicelo sakho ukuthi phela inkantolo-ke inqande-ke lana-ke lo omangalele noma umangalosile mayelana nokuthi athathe noma azise noma bekhona-ke izinqumo izinyathelo ayizozithatha-ke la zokuthi noma zokwenza lo ongumfaki omangalelwe umangalelo okuqala njengesilo samabandla ukuthi-ke kuze kube ukuthi kuphothulwa la macala-ke la omabili-ke afakiwe okuwu 751 of 2021 naleli elu-2752 of 21P. Isona-ke lokhu ayicela-ke ngakuthi ucela ukuthi nje kube ukuthi-ke lo akangathathwa njengesilo samabandla nanokuthi futhi la uma ngabe-ke kuwukuthi-ke lo oziphendelayo eceleni lesine ukuthi-ke kwenzeke konke-ke la ngokomthetho-ke kodwa banikezela inkantolo noma bacela inkantolo ukuthi ngokomthetho wakazonathela inkantolo mayimise noma-ke ingagunyazi loyo athathwe noma-ke zonke iy'nhlelo ezenziwe uma ngabe kuzogcotshwa isilo kodwa inkantolo incane ukuthi-ke akumiswe konke-ke lokho.
According to the African prince, after the passing of the Silo, the royal household was engulfed by serious divisions. The late Isilo's will nominated and appointed the late Queen as his successor to the throne. The late Isilo's will was read on 19 March 2021. On 24 March 2021, the Zulu royal family met and appointed the late Queen as regent to hold the throne during the mourning period. The minutes of such meeting were subsequently forwarded to the Premier for him to undertake the necessary official processes for the finalization of the appointment. However, before appointment was gazetted as required by law, the late Queen passed away on 29 April 2021.
Indlu yasekhosini-ke yakhubazelwa emveni kokukhubazelwa iminyama kwabe-ke sekuba khona impela uqhekeko olwabalukhulu-ke impela la njengoba phela isilo lesi sisakhuthama-ke la incwadi yaso yefa iyayikade iqoke indlovukazi lena eseyakhuthame ngasekho njengomuntu noma njengoyena wayefanele ukuthi ahlale esihlalweni. Okwathi-ke emveni isilo-ke sesiphutheme incwadi yefa yesilo yavulwa ngomhlaka 19 March unyaka 2021 nokwathi-ke lapha ngomhlaka 24 kuMarch 21 lapha-ke ebukhosini-ke bakwabe sebedibana-ke nokuyilapho babe sebeqoka-ke le ndlovukazi njengebambela bukhosi elalizobambela-ke ubukhosi ngalesi khathi-ke besazilile lana-ke lesikhathi saziliwe okwathi-ke emveni-ke lapho-ke kwasesethatha yonke imininingwana yayonke-ke umhlangano loyo obekhona yabe-ke sithunyelelwa-ke lake undunankulu ukuthi undunankulu-ke enze izinto ezifanelekile okufuneke ziphothulwe-ke mayelana nokuqokwa kwebambela bukhosi nokwathi-ke ngaphambi kokuthi-ke lana-ke kuhlanganiswe-ke yonke into nona ukuthi kuqokwe lo owayesezoba ozongena esihlani sobukhosi-ke njengokomthetho udinga kwabe-ke sekukhothama yona-ke indlovukazi okuyiyona-ke iqokiwe lapho ngomhlaka 29 ku-April-ke kunyaka ka-2021.
Prior to her death, the late Queen, at the meeting of the royal family on 30 March 2021, proposed and nominated Prince AmaZulu as the successor to the throne in terms of the Zulu customary law and customs. The Zulu royal family assembled on 14 May 2021 and identified Prince AmaZulu as a successor to the Zulu throne in accordance with the Zulu customary law and customs. Prince Mbonisi and Princess Thembi Ndlovu did not attend the meeting and tendered their apologies. However, the African princesses did not attend the meeting, although they had been invited, and did not tender any apology. At such meeting, Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi proposed and nominated Prince Misuzulu as a successor to the throne. The proposal and nomination of Prince Misuzulu as a successor to the throne was unanimously supported, and Prince Misuzulu accepted the nomination. No dissension was recorded, no query was raised, and no grievance was lodged at such meeting.
Ngaphambi kokuthi kukhothame indlovukazi la kwaba khona umhlanganweni waba khona ngaphambi kokuthi kukhothame indlovukazi lapha kwaba khona umhlangano waba khona kukhosini ngomhla ka-28 March unyaka 2021 nokuyilapho kwahlongozwa kwabe sekuqokwa umntwana uMisuzulu njengoyena ozohlala ehlalweni la ngokomthetho lana wamaZulu wesintu lapha bukhosini kwaba khona iyazane yabanjwa ngomhla ka-14 kuMeyi kunyaka ka-2021 kuyilapho kwabe sekugagulwa umntwana uMisuzulu njengoyena ozohlala esihlalweni la njengoba phela kushiwo ngokomthetho kanti umntwana uMbonisi nomntwana uThembi Ndlovu bona abazange bawuhambele le nguyazane ebanjiwe kodwa baveza noma baxolisana kwathi noma kunjalo laba amazinyane amanye la azange ayi la emhlanganweni ababekade futhi bewumenyelwe futhi abazange futhi bakhombise nanokuthi badlulise amazwi oxolisa ukungabikho kwabo emhlanganweni loyo wabakhona nokuyilapho umntwana uMangosuthu Buthelezi uhambe esehlongoza noma eveza eqoka umntwana uMisuzulu njengokuyena ofanele ukuthi athathe angene ehlalweni la ukuqokwa la nokuhlongozwa ukuthi uqokwe komntwana uMisuzulu njengoyena manje wayesezongena la esihlalweni la kwasekelwa futhi umntwana uMisuzulu wamukela naye njengokuthi la kodwa akuzange khona zinto la ezaveza ukuphikisana la noma ungajabuli lapha emhlanganweni oqhubeka.
Subsequent to the royal family meeting of 14 May 2021, a dissenting faction of the members of the royal family held a meeting where Prince Magalde was purportedly nominated as a contender for the throne. However, he did not accept the nomination. After such meeting, on 3 June 2021, Princess Thembi Ndlovu purportedly lodged a dispute with the President of the Republic of South Africa in terms of Section 8 and 12 of the Leadership Act. She stated that there was no agreement within the Zulu royal family as to who should be the successor to the throne. One section had appointed Prince Misuzulu Zwelithini as a successor, and the other Prince Magade Jackson Zwelithini. There was thus an alleged disagreement regarding the succession to the throne.
bakhona phela manje manje kuhlukane ngophela amanye amalunga alapha eFCC nawaba nowabo umhlangano nokuyilapho kwabe sekuwa khona umntwana uSimakade njengomuntu kuyena ofanele angenele noma athathe la ihlalo sobukhosi kodwa yena akazange akumukele lokho emveni kwalokho kwathi ngomhla ka-3 kuJuni 2021 umntwana uThembi Ndlovu la okubikwa ukuthi wabeke veza noma ke ebhala ukuveza ke lana ke ukuphikisana ke lapha ke ebhalela umongameli ke ngokwelana ke emzansi ke lana ke ngaphansi ke ngokuholi eveza ke lana ukuthi impela ke kukhona ke ukungaboni ngasolini lapha ke ekhayeni noma ke lapha ke ekhosini bakwaZulu ke mayelana ukuthi ubani kuyena ofuna athathe izintambo zobukhosi njengoba phela manje ke uhlangothi liyaqoka la umntwana uMisizulu sinqobile kaZwelithini njengoyikuyena ofanele ukuthi ahlale ehlalweni ekubeni abanye ngamhlobo babese beqoke umntwana ke uSimakade Jason kaZwelithini manje ke lokho phela bese kwenza ukuthi kube khona ke manje ungaboni ngasolinye lokuthi ubani ofanele ukuthi ke athathe izintambo zobukhosi.
The issues raised by the affidavits and argument are whether A, there's any coronation implicating public funds underway, B, the applicant prince, the applicant queen, and the applicant princesses have local standing and valid reason to stay the process leading to the identification, recognition, and coronation of Prince Misuzulu. C, whether Prince Misuzulu was legitimately and appropriately identified and nominated as a successor to the late Isilo. And D, whether there is any dispute to the Zulu kingship.
zomphakathi nanokuthi futhi la ukuthi umfake isicelo umntwana nomfake isicelo uNdlunkulu nalaba amazinike esilo kwabantwana ukuthi ngabe ngabona kukhona yini izathu eziphathekayo nezizawakala zokuthi ke manje bamise inqubo yokuthi ke manje kuqokwe loyo nanokugcotshwa kwamntwana uMisizulu nanokuthi futhi manje ngabe uMisizulu uqoke ngokuyiko na ekutheni njengomuntu oyena ofanele angene ezinyaweni noma lesihlalweni senkosi ke isilo nasekho nanokuthi futhi manje ke ukuthi ngabe kukhona yini futhi manje ke ukuphikisana ke lapha mayelana nobukhosi ke lapha ke ekhaya lakaZulu.
Well, under coronation, the subheading coronation, Prince Mbonisi brought the application to stay the coronation of Prince Misuzulu merely on the basis of an unfounded rumor. His application was grounded on the fact that should the coronation take place pending the finalization of the applications of the applicant queen and applicant princesses, that will cause the members of the Zulu royal family to divide even further. Further, that such coronation will result in the wasteful and weightless expenditure of public funds.
Umntwana umbonisi uveze udaba lokuthi isicelo sakhe lesayisilethe phambi kwenkantolo belethe isicelo esincike entweni yomzwabethi mana la ngitshele mayelana nokuthi kwakuzoba khona ukuthi kuzogcotshwa lo umntwana ke uMisizulu manje ke okuyinto ke futhi manje okungazange kube khona nanto akukho kugcotshwa sekwaqhubeka noma ke kwaba khona kwaphuthulwa kwavezwa ngoba bevezile ngokwabo ke nakho okuNdlunkulu ke nalabantwana ke nokubona phela sokwenza ukuthi phela manje umndeni lo lapha ke ekhosini noma lapha ke kaZulu uhlukaneke kakhulu-ke manje lokho phela manje kwawubona lokho uma ngabe-ke sekuthiwa-ke kukhona ukuthi kuyagcotshwa lokho kungaholela phela manje ekuthenini kube ney'ndleko phela ezingenasidingo nanokuthi phela manje kumoshe kusetshenziswe-ke imali.
The date of 3 December 2021 is come and gone without the arrest coronation taking place, notwithstanding the fact this court declined to grant the urgent relief sought on 2 December 2021. As a consequence, it is now common cause that there is no coronation implicating public funds underway. This application has in fact become moot and irrelevant. However, in my view, it is in the interest of justice and of the Zulu nation to deal with the question of succession to the throne as it has been raised both in the affidavits and argument as a source of dissension and tension in the royal family.
Uma usubheka-ke lapho phela inkantolo iyayigunyaza iyayinyusa ukuthi mayigunyaze ukumisa kokugcotshwa lapha ngomhla ka-2 kuDisemba 21. Manje futhi impela-ke kunjalo ukuthi akuzange kube khona ugcotshwa futhi akuzange kube khona into eyayifaka ukumoshwa-ke noma ukusetshenziswa-ke kwemali-ke yophakathi-ke la ukuthi mhlawumbe khona imali ezisetshenziswa lesikhathi kwenziwa lolu gcotshwa leli. Manje-ke ngempela-ke ekugcineni isicelo nje lesi esifakiwe-ke esingenamandla esingenazakha sibambeki nje ilento nje ukuthi uma umuntu ulwise into engenambango into engabambeki na futhi nanokuthi uma usubheka ngempela seke kwacaca ukuthi ngempela kukhona le intshisekelo-ke la efunekalayo ngokwedingo zomphakathi-ke mayelana nodaba lalapha ebukhosini phela luthinta wonke-ke umuntu-ke ngoba phela manje-ke kubeziwe-ke futhi manje nhlangothini zombili ngokwencwadi ebeyifakiwe lapha kwenkantolo lona-ke lolu daba lalapha-ke ebukhosini manje inkantolo iyabona phela manje lokhu sekuze kwenza amazinga abushelelezi lapha-ke ebukhosini noma ukungabambisani ukungazwani kukhona lapha ebukhosini.
Prince Mangosuthu Victoria states that the conduct of the African princesses and African prince is tantamount to holding the entire nation as well as the Zulu royal family to ransom through frivolous litigation for the sole purpose of delaying the inevitable. Further, that the conduct of the Africans has the effect of sowing divisions within the royal family as well as within the Zulu nation.
Ngempela manje lokhu ukwenza-ke kwabo ukuthi balethe udaba lenkantolo kuyingxenye nje ukuthi babambezele inqubo la manje-ke abasabambezeli nje inqubo yalapha ebukhosini kuphela kodwa lokho kwenza kwabo nje manje kuze kuthelele ngisho nanesizwe samazulu sisonke uma ngabe phela manje-ke bezoletha izinto ezifana lezo zizolethwa inkantolo.
Then I move on to deal with the state of the process leading to the identification, recognition, and coronation of Prince Misuzulu. No case has been made by any of the applicants for the staying of the process leading to the identification, recognition, and coronation of Prince Misuzulu as the king of the Zulu nation. The applicant queen repeatedly stated that her application has nothing to do with succession. This is also evident from her abandonment of the interdictory relief she sought in her application relating to the succession issue. The applicant princesses admitted that their application has nothing to do with the succession, They are merely challenging the identification as set out in the late Silo's will, but not the identification of Prince AmaZulu per se.
ngempela alikho icala elingathiwa-ke liye lavezwa bona abafakisicelo ukuthi bona bafisa ukuthi makumiswe ukuthi-ke nakena ukukhonjwa noma ukuqagulwa kwakhe-ke uMisizulu ukuthi-ke agcotshwe njengenkosi yesizwe samaZulu. Ngoba phela ngisho kwayena uNdlunkulu-ke la okuqala lo befaka isicelo impela ukushilo waphindelela ukuthi yena ngokwesicelo sakhe akahlangene nodaba lokuqokwa komuntu okuyena ofanele athathe izindabo zobukhosi nanokuthi phela lokho kuze kwafakazelwa nawukuthi sizokhumbula ukuthi ecelweni noma okhakheni letshela ayifakile uthe makuqhubeka lolu daba wabe esemisa noma eseyeka okunye ukuthi ezinye zeyicela ukuthi mazilalelwe inkantolo ebeyifaka udaba lomuntu okuyena ofuneke aqobe. Manje-ke futhi uma usubheka nawo-ke lana ama-princess noma amazinyane-ke Silo achazi leyo sobalula abaphikisani nokukhonjwa noma naloyo osuke ezoqokwa nje la njengokuthi abe uyena muntu ozongena bona nje abe bephikisana nako-ke bebephikisana nencwadi le yefa lesilo lesi sakhothama kodwa hayi ukuthi banencane baphikisana nokuqagulwa kukamntwana uMisizulu.
The allegation that the late Silo's will is fraudulent has no direct correlation with Prince AmaZulu's appointment as a king. His name does not feature anywhere in such will. It only features in the late Queen's will, which is not the subject of the applicant's princess application. The issue relating to succession should therefore be dealt with separately from the issues relating to marital status of the applicant queen and the authenticity and validity of the late Silo's will.
ayimthinti umntwana uMisizulu mayelana nokuqokwa kwakhe njengenkosi ngoba phela le incwadi yefa yesilo ayifaki igama likamntwana uMisizulu kodwa ifaka indlovukazi le eseyakhothama okusho ukuthi phela manje-ke sesihlanganisile ezingahlangani-ke manje ukuthi kuhlanganiswe udaba lalencwadi yesilo nale yokuqokwa kwamntwana uMisizulu. Ngaleyo ndlela-ke phela manje-ke nanalolu daba lokuthi sihlanganise udaba lemishado-ke njengokufaka kwamNdlunkulu lokuqala akuhlangani-ke lokho mayelana nokuthi ngamisa ukuthinteka kokuthi umntwana uMisizulu yena-ke angaqokwa noma ekuqokweni kwakhe njengenkosi.
According to the second, sixth, and 12th respondents, the applicant prince also does not have local standing to bring an application stating the identification, recognition, and coronation of Prince AmaZulu. Prince Mangosuthu states that as the Prime Minister of the Zulu nation, he is the only one who is authorized to convene meetings of the royal family to discuss matters pertaining to the royal house. Prince Buthelezi goes on to state that no one has ever convened such meetings except him. The issue should be decided on the plus-1 rule, and as a consequence, the version of Prince Buthelezi is accepted in this regard. Further, his application, that is the applicant's prince's application, is characterized by the non-joinder of the members of the late Isilo's family, that is, his queens and their respective children. The applicant prince has approached this court on misinformation and wrong facts. He has eventually admitted that there's no official coronation of Prince Mr. Zulu implicating the public funds underway. Consequently, the applicant has not made out a case for the relief sought in the notice of motion.
Kanti sizokhumbula phela ukuthi ngokusho-ke komntwana uMangosuthu Buthelezi ucacisile yena njengondunankulu lapha-ke esizweni samaZulu ukuthi-ke uyena-ke usegunyeni nanokuthi-ke ukabeli umhlangane lapha-ke enkosini ezindabeni eziphathelene nezokhosi. Futhi washo uqhubeke washo-ke umntwana ukuthi uButhelezi ukuthi lana-ke akekho noyedwa-ke umuntu owake wanamela le mihlangano ngaphandle noma ngabe kwakhe. Manje okusho ukuthi-ke futhi-ke la egabeni uyena umuntu oye anikezelele noma ngezinqumo zalapha-ke eziyisithathu. Ngoba phela ngokusho-ke komntwana-ke uButhelezi-ke vele-ke lolu phuzu vele eselumelekile. Okusho phela manje kulesi sicelo samntwana la ubonisi-ke la sesichazwe njengomuntu phela manje naye la njengoba bengamfakanga njengomunye lapha-ke njengelungo lapha-ke lesilo esingasekho mina. Okusho phela manje-ke lapha yena noNdlunkulu-ke nabantwana lapha. Manje-ke umntwana umbonisi-ke la indlela eze ngayo enkantolo ubelahlekisa inkantolo noma enikezelela noma ngolwazi olungalona iqiniso, ngoba phela kwanaye ekugcineni ukumukele noma wakuveza ukuthi cha ngempela akukho noma akukho ophathekayo okusaveziwe kokuthi khona ngokusemthethweni-ke ukuthi-ke kuyoxutshwa umntwana-ke la uMisizulu-ke nanokuthi futhi manje lokho kuzobandakanya ukuthi-ke kumoshwe imali la yomphakathi. Manje ngaleyo ndlela kusho ukuthi kuhlelekile ukuthi enze noma aveze-ke amaphuzu-ke ukwazi ukuthi kuvume noma kuzwakale-ke isicelo sakhe sifakile.
Identification and nomination of Prince Mr. Zulu as a successor to the Zulu throne, that's a subtopic. In terms of Section 8, Section 1 of the Leadership Act, read with Section 1773 of the KZN Act, the Isilo is identified and nominated in terms of the customary law and customs. However, the KZN Act does not make provision for the identification and nomination of the successor to the throne through a will, but in terms of the Leadership Act and KZN Act, the royal family has the prerogative to identify and nominate a successor in accordance with the customary law and traditions. It must identify a suitable person for the position before the relevant government functionary can appoint him.
Ngokomthetho-ke la wezobukhulu wendlela kwaZulu-Natal kuyachazwa ukuthi isilo siye siqokwe kanjani. Siqokwa ngokomthetho-ke la wesintu nangokwamasiko. Noma-ke kunjalo kodwa ngokwanomthetho-ke la uKZN noma kwaZulu-Natal awenzi-ke wona-ke iziyazo njengefanele uqaguleke noma uqagume bani mhlawumbe kusetshenziswa-ke ibili okuyiyona fanele-ke ikhombe umuntu kodwa kuye kulandelele ngokomthetho nangokwezingxoxo zomndeni okuyibona-ke kulamanje oye uhlale phansi uqobe lowo muntu-ke okuwona ofanelekile ukuthi uyona ozomela ngaphambi kokuphela manje-ke bese kuyandluliselwa-ke lapha-ke uhulumeni ukuthi-ke thina siwumndeni wakabani siye saqabula bani kuyena kufanele-ke azothatha isihlawulo njengomholi.
The royal family is not an organ of state, but an institution of customary law, exercising its powers in terms of the customary law, custom and processes. The genesis of the processes leading to the recognition of traditional leader lies with the royal family. In performing that function, the royal family initiates a process of identification of a person, which process leads to the exercise of public power and performing a public function of the recognition of that person by the state organ.
banawo abalungelo abo abawasebenzisa ngokuthi usintu lapho-ke okuthi-ke bayasho-ke la ezindlela zomdabu-ke la zonke into esiphathelana nezomdabu nezesintu zincika ekutheni-ke zibe zithinte lapha-ke kwezokhosi nala kwenziwa khona-ke imicimbi ethize-ke la kanjalo futhi nalama ngabe kukhona abantu endlini zomdabu kukhona abantu abaqokwayo zonke into esiphathelana ilapho baye baqhakambiswe khona-ke iqhaza labo njengendlu yalapha-ke ebukhosini kodwa akukhona phela ekutheni phela bona qobo lwabo singabathatha njengabantu esingathi la njengenjobahulumeni.
The identification of a traditional leader or successor to a traditional leader is only the initial part of the administrative action, which will only become ripe for review after the organ of state has taken the decision. It is after that stage that an aggrieved party whose rights have been adversely affected may exit the process and approach a court for appropriate relief. In this matter, the applicant does not seek to review an identification of Prince AmaZulu, but an interdictory relief. The question whether or not the matter is ripe for review does not therefore arise.
Nabo kuphela kodwa kukhona phela ukuthi inkantolo-ke ibheke ngabe iyona-ke manje izobhekela ekutheni ngabe ngokwenqubo yesintu ngokomthetho kulandeliwe noma kwenziwe na nokuyilapho izobheka khona phela ukuthi lapho emalungelweni abo noma ngokwesintu kukhona yini osuke ilungelo lakhe-ke eliye lathinteka noma laphazamiseka nokuyilapho phela inkantolo kufuneka ingenelele khona kokubheka ukuthi-ke ngokomthetho wesintu-ke la kunalo osuke kube noma-ke kungenziwanga ngendlela efanelekile ilungelo lakho manje-ke uma isibheka-ke nokuyilapho inkantolo isingenelela khona ukuthi ibheke ngabe ngokwalelo daba idinga ekutheni phela manje kubhekwe ukuthi ngabe la ukuqabula noma ukwenziwa okukhonjwa kwalowo mntwana umfihlo ukuthi-ke kwenziwe ngokhona ngokwemntwana ubeveza ukutheni makumiswe kungasho phela hhayi ukuthi bethi ayaqokwa manje-ke umbuzo wokuthi ngabe-ke kuloko-ke kuyekezweni ukuthi-ke kulandeliwe ukuthi ufanelekile lokho.
The Zulu royal family meeting was held on 14 May 2021. The members of the royal family who were present identified Prince Misuzulu as the successor to the throne. The meeting was attended by 140 members from various houses of the Zulu royal family. The African princesses and the African prince were invited, but they elected not to attend. The applicant does not at all dispute the entitlement of Prince Misuzulu to succeed to the Zulu throne, nor was such dispute raised at the meeting or subsequent thereof.
Manje laba-ke umntwana nalaba abafakiselo emazinyanisini abazange bahambele umhlangano ukuthi baye nabo ngoba phela babe kade bemenyiwe. Manje-ke futhi-ke lapha abazange futhi bakhombise-ke ukuthi lapho-ke okwenzakala noma ngokwemkhondo komntwana womSizulu bayaphikisana nokuthi angaqokwa ukuthi ingene esihlalweni asekhosi. Futhi kwakhona lapha emhlanganweni akukho okwavezwa noma okwashiwo ukukhombisa ukuphikisana nokuphakanyiswa komntwana womSizulu.
Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, in his capacity as a member of the Zulu royal family through Princess Makoko Zulu, proposed and nominated Prince Misuzulu as the successor to the Lady Silo, and the members present at the meeting accepted and agreed with the appointment of Prince Misuzulu to the throne. In fact, he was unanimously identified and nominated as a successor to the Lady Silo. Nobody raised a dispute as to the identification of Prince Misuzulu as the successor to the Lady Silo. There is not even a scintilla of assertion that any other person than Prince Misuzulu is eligible to succeed to the Lady Silo. Prince Magate disavowed that he had expressed any wish to contend for the throne. If anyone disputed Prince Misuzulu's identification and nomination, he or she should have done so at the royal family meeting where the matter was discussed.
lamntwana uMisuzulu njengokuyena ofanelekile ukuthi-ke thathe-ke izintambo-ke lapha-ke kuSilo sethu esasakhuthama. Kanti-ke amalungu ayekade ekhona lapha emhlanganweni amukela ukuqokwa kwakhe umntwana uMisuzulu njengokuyena ozodlala esihlalweni. Kahle-kahle-ke la ukuqoka-ke kwakhe ukukhethwa-ke kwakhe-ke lapha njengoyena ozohlala esihlalweni akuzange kube khona ukuphikisana ukuthi mhlawumbe kube khona ovezayo ukuthi cha bona bayaphikisana noma babekade belapha emhlanganweni cha abahambisani nalokho. Kanti futhi-ke lana akekho omunye-ke umuntu ovezwe njengokuthi-kena osemandleni noma naye osezingeni noma ongakwazi ukuthi alwisane nokuthi yena ungcono usethubeni elingcono lokuthi angaqokwa undlula yena-ke umntwana-ke uMisuzulu. Ngoba ngisho kwayena umntwana uSimakade-ke cha waveza yena ukuthi cha akaphikisani noma akubona khona ukulwisana nokuthi-kena nokuqokwa kwakhe umntwana-ke la uMisuzulu. Manje okusho ukuthi uma ngabe kukhona umuntu ongahambisani nowayephikisana nokuqokwa komntwana woMisuzulu loyo phela kwakufanele abe khona lapha emhlanganweni ukuze akwazi ukuthi-ke aveze-ke lokho lapha emhlanganweni.
No allegation has been made that the purported identification of Prince Makate Zulu accords with the Zulu custom, with the Zulu customary law and customs pertaining to succession. Prince Mbonisi lacks local standing. He has failed to identify the persons whom he allegedly represents. He has also failed to identify the lineage of such persons, if there are any, and the core structure under which they seek relief. His application was in any event without merit. So, Mbonisi.
Ngokwezinsolo bekade ziveziwe-ke la mayelana nokuqokwa komntwana uSimakade-ke ngokwesintu nangokwamasiko ethu okuveza ukuthi-ke la njengoba phela uMbonisi uhlulekile ukuthi-ke aveze umuntu okuyena noma ammele noma amveza kuyena ofanele ukuthi kungathiwa ufanele ukuthi agunyaza anikezelelwe lelo gunya lokuthi angayezi esikhundleni noma-ke eqokweni-ke kunalo oqokwe okusho ukuba manje isicelo sakhe sikhona ngale kwezakhe noma kwamaphuzu azwakalayo ukuthi-ke ingani faka lesi sicelo.
The royal family is constituted of members who form part of the royal family of the 5 precedent kings, Ejwayo, Dinizulu, Solomon, Peguzulu, and Zwelithini. There has been no genuine dispute as to the core structure of the royal family, which is central to the decision-making process of the successor to the king. A feeble assertion has been made that the royal family meeting was attended by persons who are not members of the Zulu royal family, and reliance has been sought from Mpepu vs. Mpepu, Ramablan and others, 2019, ZSACA 58, and 2019, volume 7 of the BCLR 862 SCA. In Mpepu, the decision to identify the king of Bavenda was not only taken by the royal family, as required by the customary law, customs, and the Traditional Leadership and Governance Framework Act. However, in the present case, the persons referred to are faceless and have no name, so to make the assertion a reality. Under Zulu customs, a child born of a princess is a prince or princess and a member of the royal family, even if he or she bears a different surname to Zulu. It could have been possible that some members who attended the Zulu royal meeting did not bear a Zulu surname, like Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, but if they were born of Zulu princesses, they are members of the Zulu royal family. The applicant princesses and applicant prince did not make application in that some of the people who took a decision to identify and nominate Prince Msizulu as a successor were not members of the Zulu royal family. The applicant princesses and the applicant prince confessedly stated that they were not in attendance at such meeting, and the allegation that persons were present who were not members of the Zulu royal family is a hearsay, which needs confirmation by persons who were in attendance. No such confirmation has come forth.
la uma ngabe uqokwa lo osuke iy'nkosi. Inkantolo-ke ikesichaza ukuthi phela akona ukuthi lapha emndenini uma ngabe kukhulunywa ngomndeni wasebukhosini emhlanganweni bakhona akona ukuthi kuye kuhambeke umhlangano wasebukhosini laba bakaZulu kuphela ngoba phela manje-ke kuchazwa inkantolo ziyacafuna kwenye lecala elaqagulwa lapha-ke eceleni labhekana nomphefumulo kaMabulana lapho kwakade kuqabulwa khona-ke qaqulwa nokukhonjwa inkosi kubekwa inkosi uBandela la naye futhi manje-ke ngokomthetho la wesintu uyachaza ngokusobala umthetho wesintu nangamasiko ukuthi njengoba-ke kulolu daba akukona kuphela ukuthi abantu abahambela izililo zasebukhosini ilabo abangabakaZulu kuphela. Abanye kuyenzeka engenaso isibongo sakaZulu kodwa uma ngabe-ke ezalwa khona ebukhosini ukuthi uma ngabe-ke ezalwa abantwana njengomntwana ozalwa amadodakazi akhona akwabantwana bakhona naye kuseba phela uyilunga noma umbango wakhona lapha-ke kaZulu njengaye umntwana uma ngoSuthu yize-ke lapho ukuthi-ke phela manje kungayena ukuthi phela manje naye umZulu kodwa kuba yingxenye manje-ke laba amazinyane esilo lana-ke naye umntwana lo abaveza ukuthi manje-ke la babengahambelanga umhlangano kwathathwa isinqumo abantu abangasona isibongo salapha-ke kwaZulu ekubeni bona babekade bengekho phela manje kusho sebesitshela ngenziwa bethu ngoba phela bona babengekho lapha qobo kulowo mhlangano lo ngoba phela njengoba bengawuhambeli langa okusho manje ayikho into esingathi iyisiqinisekiso kule nto bona-ke asebeyisho.
The evidence establishes that the identification and nomination of Prince Msizulu accords with the Zulu law and custom, and that the subject of the Zulu kingdom contributed towards the payment of his mother's lobolo. However, according to Prince Mbonisi, the identification process of Prince Msizulu on 14 May 2000 was flawed because it failed to develop criteria for the identification of a suitable person to be a successor in terms of Section 2 of the Leadership Act. The section does not deal with the identification and recognition of traditional leadership, but deals with the development of customary law by a particular community so as to be in line with the Bill of Rights. The relevant section which deals with the identification and recognition of traditional leaders is Section 8 of the Traditional Leadership Act. However, due to Prince Mbonisi's non-attendance at the royal family meeting, whatever he states in this regard is hearsay.
umama waloyo mntwana ukuthi ulotsholwe isizwe nanokuthi futhi-ke la uma sibheka ngokomntwana umbonisi-ke la njengoba-ke echaza ukuthi inqubo yokukhethwa kwakhe umntwana umzila ngomhla ka-14 kuMeyi unyaka 2021 akuhambanga-ke ngendlela efanelekile noma ngomthetho wezobuholi-ke la manje-ke futhi-ke ngokwalo mthetho-ke lo mthetho-ke lana awubhekani nokuqagulwa la kwabantu kodwa wona uqhakambisa ngokwesintu la kakhulukazi futhi la kuhambisana nokwamalungelo okuwukuthi-ke la ngokukuchaza-ke kwakhe manje sekuyinto-ke eyiphuma eceleni ngoba phela yena akabanga ingxenye yalo mhlanga ukuthi asitshele ngento ayaziyo kodwa manje usitshela ngenziwa bethu yokuyiwayikuthenga.
Prince Bangosutu Pteles, who was in attendance at the meeting, states that before proposing and nominating the name of Prince Msizulu as a successor to the late Isilo, he explained the criteria which are taken into account when identifying a person as a successor to the throne. Such criteria are laid down by the Zulu customary law and customs. The following criteria are taken into account whether the lobolo of that person's mother was contributed wholly or in part by the relevant tribe or nation, and the status of the maternal grandfather of such a person. In the present case, it is common cause that the late Queen's ilobolo was paid by the Zulu nation, and that she was born of Eswatini royalty, a daughter of King Sobhuza II. On the ground alone that her lobolo was contributed by the Zulu nation, she precedes other wives in polygamous marriage and becomes a great wife who is expected to bear a successor to the throne.
ukuthi la njengokuyena owayezoba uzothatha-ke isitambu zokukhosi-ke lapha-ke kwisilo sesakhuthala. Wayechaza futhi umuntu ukuthi uma umuntu kuyena okuyaye afaneleke ukuthi angathatha isihlalo sobukhosi onjani na. Njengoba phela-ke echaza ukuthi bhekwe iphuzu lokuthi uma ngabe lapho onkulunkulu bebonke loyo ndlunkulu okuyena osuke lotsholwe yisizwe kuye kubhekelele futhi ukuthi phela uyena osemathubeni nanokuthi futhi kubhekwe imuva lakhe lokuthi ngabe uzalwa ebukhosini na. Njengoba phela manje-ke la kulolu daba-ke lolu esikhuluma-ke ngalo indlovukazi lesiyakhothana iyalotsholwa yisizwe kanti futhi uzalwa ebukhosini lapha-ke eSwatini njengoba indodakazi yaNkosi uSobhuza wesibili. Manje ngalelo phuzu nje lona-ke lilodwa lokuphela yena walotsholwa isizwe samaZulu-ke na umnika phela ukuthi lapha-ke esithenjini noma-ke lapha-ke ekhosini kwabanye ondlunkulu uyena oba ndlovukazi laba-ke abanye-ke ngenxa yokuthi phela manje yena uyena osemathubeni ukuthi phela manje akwazi ukuthi anikwe igunya lokuthatha iy'ntambo njengoba phela ewundlovukazi ondlunkulu.
Dispute to Zulu kingship. It is common cause that there is no contender to the Zulu royal throne. Prince Magade, who has been mooted as a possible contender, disavowed any claim to the throne or any intention to do so. As a consequence, Prince Msizulu remains an undisputed successor to the Zulu throne.
Akekho umuntu ombangisayo noma umbango khona okungathiwa ubangisa umntwana wesizulu la kulolu daba ngenxa yokuthi phela kwayena umntwana uSimakade naye usholo ngokwakhe la ukuthi cha hayi ngoba ukuthi ubeke ukuthi naye athole la isihlalo khona lokho phela kanti osekwenza ukuthi phela manje kusho kahle kubangwa umbango ongenamuntu abanganaye uyabangiswa kodwa manje akekho ovelele oveza ukuthi hayi njengoba umntwana ebangiswa nangu omunye abangisanayo naye. Lokho phela kusho ukuthi manje-ke umntwana wesizulu umile nje ekhuzule ngale kokuthi kube khona omthintayo noma ombangisayo ekutheni kuthiwe nangu omunye eceleni kwakhe okuyena naye obheke sona-ke isihlalo.
So he is an undisputed successor to the throne, to the Zulu throne. It has been argued that Prince Msizulu has been appointed as successor to the late Isilo by the late Queen, who had been nominated and appointed as a successor in the late Isilo's will. However, the will of the late Queen is not impeached. The inevitable conclusion is that even if the late Isilo's will can be found to be invalid, it will not have any bearing on the succession to the Zulu throne. Further, the royal family, which in terms of the Leadership Act and customary law has the prerogative to appoint traditional leadership, assembled on 14 May 2021, and identifying Prince Misuzulu as a successor to the late Isilo.
Sibeke la kuvezwa ngokwenkumishiswana ukuthi lo ungumntwana uMisuzulu owa njengokuthi ke kube yena ke uzoqoka kwakhe ukuthi azongena ke la kulesikhundla noma esihlalweni sokuba-ke Isilo ngenxa yencwadi yefa yesilo esingasekho le elaqoke indlovukazi naye engasekho manje-ke lokho kuholela ekutheni khona manje-ke bese bebe nalo kuphikisana. Kanti sizokhumbula phela ukuthi umntwana uMisuzulu yena uqokwe ngencwadi yefa yendlovukazi le engasekho okuyiyona engazange ivezwe lenkandla uma kuyimfundo mpikiswana-ke ngayo. Lokho phela kusho ukuthi manje sizokhumbula-ke la ukuthi njengoba-ke la ngokomthetho wezomholi la kwezendabuka ukuthi-ke phela manje uqobo kwenkosi noma kwesilo kuye kube nenguyazane mbandakanya-ke la abasebukhosini noma-ke yebo abasebukhosini kube yibona-ke abaqoka uloyo asebebona efanele ukuthi athathele izintambo. Ngempela-ke la kulolu daba-ke yiloko kwenzeka-ke la ngoba ngomhla 14 kuKhumbuli unyaka 2021 umntwana uMisuzulu-ke wangaqokwa-ke njengokuyena-ke owayezongena-ke lana-ke esihlalweni esilo sakhuthayo.
There is no genuine dispute as to the succession of Prince Misuzulu, as he is, in terms of the customary law and custom, the rightful heir to the throne. No one has disputed the correctness of the customary law and custom by which the name of Prince Misuzulu was raised and endorsed by the royal family. The applicant princesses and the applicant prince have not made any assertion that the appointment of Prince Misuzulu was not in accordance with the Zulu customary law and traditions. The letter Princess Thembindlovu addressed to the president stating that there was a disagreement in the Zulu royal family as to who should succeed to the throne between Prince Misuzulu and Prince Smagade did not comply with the provisions of Section 8, Section 4 of the Leadership Act.
Noqobo-ke kwakhe-ke umntwana-ke uMisuzulu njengoba phela manje ngokomthetho umthetho-ke la wesintu-ke impela umntwana uMisuzulu ufanelekile ukuba yena njengomntwana ozoqoka ukuthi ahlale lapha esihlalweni njengoba phela manje-ke akekho umuntu osaphikise isintu sethu nalomthetho wesintu okuyiwona angaphansi-ke kwawo ngendlela yena-ke futhi umntwana-ke akhuliswe-ke ngawo njengoba phela lapha kuba lapha ebukhosini nanokuthi futhi uma sibheka ngokwala bantwana abebephikisana la ngokugcotshwa kwakhe umntwana uMisuzulu akukho abakuvezile-ke la ukuthi yena akuhambisani nomthetho wesintu namasiko-ke la ukuthi-ke ukuqoka kwakhe ngoba futhi uma ubheka nanencwadi le yamntwana uThembindlovu ethula lapha-ke kumongameli ukuthi-ke ngempela-ke kukhona-ke ukuphikisana noma-ke ukungavumelani mayelana nokuthi-ke kuqoke umntwana-ke uMisuzulu-ke la nomntwana-ke kungalunganga khona phakathi umntwana uMisuzulu umntwana uSmagade ayihambisani noma ayigcwalisi zonke izidingo ezihambisana nomthetho lokhu ngibona-ke ukuqokwa kwezabaholi.
The president should act when there is evidence or allegation that the identification of a person as a king or queen was not done in accordance with customary law and customs. No such evidence or allegation has been brought to the notice of the president in this regard. The letter of Princess Thembindlovu lacked the necessary allegation that Prince Misuzulu, who was identified by the royal family, had not been identified in accordance with Zulu customary law and traditions, and that Prince Smagade has a better right or entitlement to succeed to the throne. More so, it is common cause that Prince Smagade declined the nomination, As a result, he is not a contender. Even if he purported to accept the nomination, he could not have legitimately been identified, as he does not qualify in terms of the Zulu customary law and customs. Prince Magade's purported identification was therefore doomed. The applicants have therefore failed to make out a case that there is a dispute about the successor to the throne on the basis of which the President or the Premier may investigate or refer the matter back to the Zulu royal family for consideration and resolution.
Abukufakazi obuveza noma izitolo eziyezavezwa phambi kwanenkantolo eziyezavezwa phambi kwakhe umongameli lekhoko. Uyabona incwadi le kaMntwana uThembi Ndlovu ngempela ke ibikade intenga ibuleka ukuthi iveze ikuze ukuthi la uMntwana ke umisizwe okuyena ke owaqokwa lapha ke ebukhosini la ukuthi impela akazange aqokwe ngokomthetho ke wamaZulu noma ke wesintu, nanokuthi futhi aveze phela ukuthi ngabe uMntwana uSimakade yena usesimeni ke esingcono noma usemathubeni ke angcono ukuthi yena angakwazi ukuthi ke ahlale lapha ehlalweni sobukhosi. Nani ukuthi kakhulukazi uma usubheka ke futhi la into ke futhi esiyaziyo ingabhekisi ukuthi uMntwana uSimakade waphikisa ukuthi yena ukuqokwa kwakhe wazihlangula ke la. Nanokuthi futhi manje bevele yena engeke afaneleke ukuthi phela angenele lapho akekho ezingeni lokuthi angaba uMntwana ogunyazwa ukuthi angaqokwa ukuthi athathe leso sihlalo leso ke. Manje ke phela laba abafaka isicelo bahlulekile ukuthi phela manje ke baveze lana ke amaphuzu abo okuphikisana nalona oqokiwe ke la esihlalweni ke la ukuze phela manje ke umongameli noma ke undunankulu akwazi ukuthi phela manje enze ukhulu lakhe nanokuthi futhi aphinde abuyisele udaba ke emuva lapha ke esigodlweni noma lapha ke ebukhosini ukuze baqale phansi manje bayicubungule babhekelele ke la ngokwe ukuthi bekhona isixazululo abazonikezela ngaso.
There's no basis for interdicting the process leading to the recognition and coronation of Prince Masuzulu. The Premier or the President as the organ of state has not yet acted which could justify an approach to the court for a review if it were to be sought. Had the applicant sought a review of the identification, their application would have been solely dismissed on the ground that it is premature. The nomination and appointment of Prince Masuzulu as successor to the throne and king of the Zulu nation in terms of the wishes of the late queen and her will has been subsumed by the decision of the royal family identifying and nominating Prince Masuzulu as the king of the Zulu nation. The royal family has the prerogative to identify and nominate traditional leadership. The wishes of the late king or queen with regard to the succession are important, though they are not decisive. The late queen nominated and appointed her firstborn son, Prince Masuzulu, as the king of the Zulu nation. Failing him, she nominated and appointed any of her sons to be the successor to the throne. This demonstrates clearly that the late queen was fully alive to the fact that her last wishes as to the nomination and appointment of Prince Masuzulu may not be decisive. More so, there's nothing in this matter showing that the royal family merely deferred to the wishes of the late queen and that such wishes were not in accordance with the Zulu customary law and traditions.
uhulumeni la bengakagunyazwa noma bengafaneleki ukuthi-ke lo balungeleleke njengokwekade ukuthi umbhekelele njengoba phela manje ngokwalaba abafaka isicelo abamangali-ke la bengakabuyekezwa noma babheke ukuqagula nokukhonjwa indlela abenze ngayo laba baphuthumile kuwukuthi kungakafanele indlela abasheshe ngabo phela ukuqagula nokukhonjwa kwakhe umntwana uMisizulu njengoyena ozohlala lapha-ke esihlalweni sosikhosi AmaZulu kwasukela noma lapha-ke kwaba isifiso saloyo indlovukazi siyakhothama ngokuphela manje-ke imbali encwadini yakhe yefa ukuthi-ke uyena-ke ozothatha isihlalo sobukhosi-ke laphana nanokuthi futhi-ke lana-ke aphinda akuchaza ukuthi wayehambisana nomthetho-ke la wesintu nowamasiko ukuqagula-ke kwakhe lapha ngoba phela indlovukazi lengasekho-ke yaqoka umntwana uMisizulu njengomntwana wakhe wokuqala ukuthi uyena kufanele-ke athathe-ke izintambo kodwa-ke uma ngabe-ke kukuthi lokhu akamukeli noma ehluleka lokho kwakuzoba abanye bamadodana-ke akhe lokho phela kwakucaca okusobala ukuthi phela manje yena umntwana yena indlovukazi le yayinalo ulwazi-ke lalo ukuthi-ke kungenzeka ukuthi ukunquma kwakhe ukuthatha kwakhe isinqumo sokuthi athi ukuthi uqagula umntwana uMisizulu kungabi ukuthi phela yisona sinqumugwayati okungibona kufanele kulandelele nanokuthi futhi manje-ke lapha-ke ekhosini-ke la uma usuvela akukho abasekhona ukuthi la manje-ke abahloniphi noma abazimukeli izifiso zale indlovukazi esengasekho ukuthi uthi ngaleyo ndlela konke lokho ayikwenzile wayesalandelela umthetho wesintu.
The evidence establishes that there's no contender to the throne who professes or is professed to have a better right, entitlement, or title to succeed to the throne than Prince Misuzulu. The applicant has not made out any case that the identification of Prince Misuzulu as a successor to the throne was not in accordance with Zulu customary law and customs and the provisions of Section 8, Section 1 of the Leadership Act, read with Section 17 of the KZN Act. The applicant has accordingly failed to establish any right which is protectable by an interdict.
Ngokufakazi-ke kuthe bavezwa-ke phambi kwanenkantolo ukuyaveza ngosobala ukuthi kahle kahle akekho umuntu obangisana obangisana nalesi sikhundla salapho isihlalo lesasekhosini ongachaza ukuthi ungcono kunaye uMisizulu ngale kwakhe uMisizulu ukuthi uMisizulu uyena osemathubeni noma elingcono ukuthi ukuthi laba abafaka isicelo ngempela bahlulekile ukuthi baveze ubufakazi bokuveza ukuthi uMisizulu lo ungani noma-ke imaphi amaphutha ngokomthetho wesintu lo ukuthi yena ungani-ke yena bengafanele ukuthi angaqokwa.
And the result, the application is dismissed with costs, such costs to include the costs of 2 counsel. And this concludes the 3 applications.
ngaleyo ndlela-ke kusho ukuthi zombili icelo zontathu iy'celo bezifakwe phambi inkantolo-ke isiziphothulile.
The court adjourns.
lapho singenamgodi okuxasha izwe lisiphikile ngakuyeba singenasihlabo sokuvika okhansela ngwemamsimude bebazimtshela isibheleko ngezabafokazane undaba bamthele ngehlazweni nkulu bathinta kanjaba ngezandusela amaZulu ngebizo enkantolo ubizwa ngabomthetho bemfundo libedalalela kafanele izindlebe indaba ebuzwe ngumsebenzi wabezindaba wathi velani impilo bezizweni sikazulu saba sisebunyemeni ngafaka bomthetho benu bentabandaba sukumugubule kube njabozulu emakheni kube njabobhedane bebakusethe kubabamhlophe nakuhle ukhale kukosi bakhe weyosikandaba agobukela babazulu umtulesu kandaba uyokula ngezulu bezesiqondane libenyabuza ukuthi ngabe kukosilile na ehambela phezulu amanye amakhosi ehambela phansi bathi abantu bewusaba umhlabathi kunama-AK-47 kunentsholongwane ilanga lakithi kazulu abathi behleka abehlokofuna abehlokozilela nabepolitiki abezizwe abezingana uzungalibebezulu ngoba kawunasebenzi sibopho sabezingana wena ngasokuza